Good e- Okay, good evening. As always, tonight's shiur, Ilu Nishmat Avi Mari Dober Merinu and Halevi, even Rati Rochel Bat Harav Michael, Refuah Shlema for all of those who are ill. And tonight this Shabbos we actually have the privilege of completing the second of the Chamisha Chumshei Torah. We finished Sefer Shmot with the reading of Pekuday. Even though if it were not a leap year, we'd be reading Vayakel and Pekuday together to finish Book of Shmot, but we're only reading Pekuday. And tonight we're going to focus on the theme of Pekuday, which is basically the completion and delivery and assembly of the Mishkan. Although, as it also talks about the Gadim of the Kohanim, but we're going to focus on the completion of, as I said, and delivery and assembly of the Mishkan is going to be tonight's focus. And away we go. So, after the parsha describes, the first chapter of the parsha is the Mishkan audit, where all the metals were used for. It then tells us about all the garments for the Kohanim that were made. And then the final pasuk of that section, where after it's told us about all of the begadim of the Kohanim, it tells us the following. Pasuk, this is Perek Lamed Tet, Pasuk Lamed Bet, if you'd like to follow along. It's the last pasuk in the third aliyah, if I'm not mistaken. Well, I don't remember the aliyah so well in Pekuday because you're always reading it together with Vayakel. But the pasuk says the following about Techel, and it was completed. Kol avodat Mishkan ohel moed, all of the avodah, the work of the tent that was called Ohel Moed, or the sanctuary, the tabernacle, whatever we want to translate Mishkan, sanctuary. It's called Ohel Moed. Vayasu b'nei Yisrael. You'll notice I've highlighted this. Vayasu b'nei Yisrael kol asher tzivah Hashem et Moshe kein asu. B'nei Yisrael did all that Hashem commanded Moshe. That is exactly what they did. We're going to see how the parsha relate to that. But I want to just skip 1 minute, then the parsha gives a complete summary of that they brought the Mishkan to Moshe, and Pasuk Lamed Gimel says, "Vayaviu et Mishkan el Moshe." They bring it to Moshe, and again lists all the pieces that they bring to Moshe, which we're going to go back to in a minute. But then it ends very similarly with the closing, very similar to what we just read. Moshe, according to all that Hashem commanded Moshe, Kain asu b'nei Yisrael, so b'nei Yisrael did at kol ha'avodah, all of the avodah. Now, interestingly enough, it just as Bnei Yisrael did all this avodah, which is exactly what we said up front. It said they did all avodah of the Mishkan. Then it says, Vayar Moshe et kol hamalacha. Moshe saw all the malacha. V'nei asu otan, they had done it. Kasher tzivah Hashem kein asu. Again, it's exactly as Hashem commanded, that's what they did. Vayivarech otam Moshe, and Moshe blesses them. We're going to see how the parshanim relate to all of this phraseology. But before that, I wanted to go through very simply a comparison, because at the beginning of Parshat Vayakel, when we began this project, the Torah also listed all of the pieces. And I want to compare the two lists, the list of what Moshe told Bnei Yisrael they have to make, and the list of what they bring back to Moshe. Okay, just very briefly, we're going to go through this. You'll notice on the screen I have a comparison on the right side is our parsha, what they bring to Moshe. On the left side is what we read about in Vayakel that they had to make. So it begins with Vayaviu et HaMishkan el Moshe. They brought the Mishkan et ha'ol v'et kol kelav krasav krashav richav amudav adunav. Now let me give you what the color codes mean here for the next section. Blue means words that are added here that did not appear in Vayakel. Yellow means something that has a slightly different portrayal. And green is going to be something that's the order has been switched. Because we're going to see that for the most part, the order that they bring the pieces to Moshe, or at least the way the order that the Torah tells us they brought the pieces to Moshe, exactly lines up with the order that they were commanded to make them. So you'll see the first pasuk in Vayakel starts with the Mishkan, the Oel, the Michseu, cover, the Krasav, Krashav, Richav, Amudav, Adonav. We have very similar phraseology in our first pasuk here. They bring the Mishkan to Moshe, the Oel, and Krasav, Krashav, Richav, Amudav, Adonav. Interestingly enough, we have that words added et kol kelav. What it means, great question. I'm not giving answers. I'm just pointing these out at this point. Okay, and most of them I don't really have answers for. I'm just pointing out that there are differences. Now, also, you'll notice that in the beginning, when they're told to make it, they are told michsehu, the cover. But if you'll notice here, we have two michseh. There's a michseh orot ha'elim ha'adamim and michseh orot ha'tchashim. There are two different covers that are made to put over the Mishkan. One is a tent that's made, a covering that's made of ram skin, and the other is made of tchashim skin. Now, also, you'll notice here when they bring it, they also bring parochet hamasach. The parochet is also brought here, whereas it's not listed in Vayakel until we go to the next pasuk. Suddenly, the parochet is listed together with the aron. But if we think about the way this is presented, it's presented from the inside of the structure out. So we start with the basic structure, which is the poles, the krashim, the poles, and the tent cover. That's the basic. And then we put the outer covers on it. And the parochet hamasach is the parochet that separates from the kodesh to the kodesh kodashim. In the making, in the command to make it, it's associated with the ark, with the aron the badim, which is the central focal piece of furniture in the Mishkan. That's where we start, and then we're going to work our way outwards. The next pasuk is going to talk about those things that are on the other side of the parochet. But interestingly enough, I think this one I have a reason for. The reason it's listed together with the curtains when it's brought to Moshe is because it was made by the same people. The people who made the curtains were doing the fabric work, were the ones who made the parochet, rather than the people who were doing the metal work and the woodwork. They made the aron and the poles for the aron, etc. But they did not make the parochet. So the parochet came from what I will call it the fabric shop, as opposed to the other things that came from the wood and metal making shops. So that perhaps is why when they bring it, it's listed together with that, whereas when it's made, it's described together with the aron, because it's really part of going outward from the aron. Once we've put the poles up, we're working our way outward from through the Mishkan. Interestingly enough, the aron, when they bring it, it's called aron ha'edut. Again, I can offer a suggestion where I think because when they first get the commandment, there's nothing, they aren't told what the function of the aron is. Presumably somewhere along the way, the luchot got put in the aron, or at least people were told that the luchot ha'edut were going to be put in the aron, and that's why here it's already called aron ha'edut. Just a possibility. Et hashulchan v'et kol kelav et yet lechem hapanim. The shulchan and all of its accoutrements and the lechem hapanim. Interestingly enough, when they're told to make it, the shulchan, it lists the badim, the poles, separately. This is back in Vayakel. The poles are listed separately. Here they're not even mentioned. It's presumably that's subsumed with everything that's involved in the shulchan already includes the badim. Whereas when the bottom again, the carrying poles. We see the same thing with the we're going to see the same thing with the Mizbech HaZahav. So again, remember, this section here deals with the three pieces of furniture that are in what is called the Kodesh, the part that is enclosed by the boards, but it's not the inner part where the aron is. They are the Shulchan, the Menorah, and the Mizbach HaKetoret are the three pieces of furniture, and they are described next. The Shulchan, the Menorah. Now, interestingly, the Menorah, its name is changed from Menorat HaMa'or, the menorah that gives light when they were told to build it, to Menorah HaTahorah, the pure menorah. Why? Great question. Don't have an answer. Interestingly enough, the order of the utensils of the menorah and the candles that actually are going to be lit, or the oil holders, the nerot, really the oil holders, are switched. That's why they're in green. And just the order is switched. And also the candles are described as nerot hama'aracha, the nerot that are used for lighting. Again, don't have a clue for that why that is. The mizbeach, when it's brought, is called Mizbach HaZahav. When it was commanded, it's called Mizbach HaKetoret. Interestingly enough, why there has two names are fairly obvious. One is describing its function. It's the Mizbech on which the incense is offered, is how it's described. Zahav is the material it's coated with. So presumably, again, the workers coming from the gold workshop would have said, okay, here's your gold Mizbeach, as opposed to the copper one, which came from the copper workshop, which we're going to see later. The same exact thing with the copper. We're going to have two different names for it, one the functional name, the other the material name. And also the masach, the again the curtain that sits outside has a slightly different name. Here it's called masach petach oel. There it was called masach hapetach lepetach hamishkan. So again, the question is the oel and the mishkan the same thing? And there are times when the answer is yes, and there are times when the answer is no. There are times when the Mishkan itself is referring to the OL, the entire thing, and there are times when the Mishkan is referring to specifically the first covering that goes over it, and the OL is referring to the three covers together with the poles as the whole thing is the OL. So again, different terminology used at different points in time. We see the same thing with the outer altar. Now we've worked our way outside of the Kodesh. We're now in the courtyard. First thing we run into is the Mizbeach HaNechoshet, the copper-covered altar, which is also called, back when we were commanded, Mizbeach HaOlah. Again, one being functional, the other being material-related. Again, here it's the same thing, the Badim, the Kol Kelav, the Mizbar Nechoshet, and by the way, in the same verse, the Kior, the basin, and the stand for the basin, through which was to be used for the Kohanim to wash their hands. Then we get to the outer hangings of the outer courtyard, Kalei Chotzer, at Amudah at Adonah. Now, interestingly enough, when they bring it, it's called Amudah and Adonah. We've slightly switched the verb around, but that wasn't enough. And Masach L'Shar HaChotzer. And here, interestingly enough, the order again of the Meitarim and the Yesedot is switched. Now, what is what? The Meitarim is basically the ropes that tie the ends of the curtains to the tent pegs. The Yetedot are the pegs, the tent pegs that are used to hold the curtains from flying off in the wind. And interestingly enough, and then it adds at the end, what does that include? Great question. I don't know. They may have had tools that they used to set up, to maybe to thread the strings through the ends of the tent. They maybe needed some kind of threader. Maybe they needed some kind of tire. They needed possibly a mallet or a hammer to drive the pegs in. But that's probably what Klei Avodat HaMishkan Li'ol Moed are. They're not listed in the requirements for what they had to make because they're not part of the sanctuary itself. They're part of the tools that the assembly team needed. And that's probably, I suspect, what Klei Avodat HaMishkan Li'ol Moed is referring to. The tools that were needed by the assembly team to assemble everything. Okay, then we get to the garments as Bigdei Hasrat l'Sharet B'Kodesh, which Rashi wants to suggest Bigdei Hasrat are the carrying bags that were used to carry the things from point A to point B. A lot of the items weren't carried single-handedly, even though the menorah, for example, is carried alone. It is wrapped before it is carried. The Mizbeach, both of the altars are wrapped in a bag before they're carried. Similarly, the Shulchan. So Rashi wants to say that is what exactly what Bigdei Hasrat is referring to. The auxiliary stuff of the Mishkan that was used, basically the luggage that was used to transport all of the stuff when they had to transport it. And then at Bigdei HaKodesh Aaron HaKohen, Bigdei HaChahen, the garments for Aaron and his sons. And that's the end of the list. So basically, if we look at that list, it's pretty one-to-one. There are a few, as I said, some changes, but for the most part, it's one-to-one. They did everything exactly as they were told to do. And that's exactly why the pasuk ends with Kechol asher tziva Hashem et Moshe. Exactly as Hashem commanded Moshe, Kein asu b'nei Yisrael et kol ha'avodah. They did all of the work. All that they were supposed to do was done exactly to specification. And that's why Vayar Moshe kol ha'malacha. Now Moshe sees all the malacha. And the question is, why does it switch from avodah to malacha? Again, they saw it, presumably, when they were doing it, they saw it as avodah. This is, we are serving Hashem. And we're going to see this in the parshat a little bit later. They saw this as serving Hashem. Moshe saw it as malacha, as craftsmanship, as beautiful work, exquisite work. And Moshe saw that they had done it exactly as God had commanded. Okay, how many projects do you know where everything goes exactly according to specifications? First time, got it all right. No problems whatsoever. And not only that, we're talking about hundreds of pieces that had to fit together and lock together to make this a solid structure. We're not talking about, okay, it was one mold, they made everything. We're talking about lots of different pieces. and they all managed to fit together perfectly. Vayivarech otam Moshe, and Moshe gives them a blessing. And that's the end of the parsha, and now we're going to go and see how the parsha even look at this. Okay? So the first question is, it says Vatechel, that the work was completed passively. It doesn't say that the Jews completed all the work. We go back to that first pasuk that I quoted, you'll notice it says Vatechel kol avodat Mishkan ohel moed. All of the work was completed. It doesn't say that they completed. If we go back to our original creation of the world chapter, and we have a very similar word. It says there, except there it's not Vatechel, it's Vayichal. Okay? Vayichal, what's the next word? In Vayichulu, what do we say? Vayichal Elokim, et kol asher asa. Hashem specifically completed everything, and everything was done by Hashem. Here, Vatechel, it doesn't say Vatechel ha'ovdim. It doesn't say Vatechel. It doesn't say anything. It just says the work was completed. Almost to imply that the work was finished by itself in some extent. And that's exactly what we're going to see. Okay? Hapula pula al shlemota nasta al yidei kol Yisrael. Firstly, he says the work, in order to complete the work, we needed the contributions of all of the Jewish people. Wait a minute. There were only a handful of artisans involved in building this. How can Sforno say that everybody was involved? The answer is, some of them gave donations, and some, their donation was their handiwork, their skills as craftspeople. Screen just gone blank. I assume I'm still connected. In other words, they all did this voluntarily to do what Hashem had asked the children of Israel to do. Now, interestingly enough, the verse ends with the words Kain Asu. This is exactly what they did. And Sforno says, what does that mean to teach us? Lo pachot, nothing less, but also v'lo yoter. They didn't make anything extra. Everything they made was something that they made according to specification that was required for a purpose. So there was nothing that was missing. Everything was exactly as it was commanded. The Rechaim elaborates. Vatechel kol avodat. Again, all of the work was completed. Perush, what does that mean? Lo heim kilu. Okay? They didn't finish it all. Shimhaya Hashem mitzaveh od ba'avodato yitbarach yasu b'nei Yisrael b'chol avat nafsham. The Jews were ready. Am Yisrael was ready to do more work. It wasn't that they were exhausted. We're spent. We can't do any more work. But the work was done. They stopped working not because they were exhausted, or the funds were exhausted, or the material was exhausted. They stopped because the work that they had been commanded to do was done. And they said, their thought process was, Hashem wants us to do more. He will command us to do more. The only reason they stopped was because they finished doing everything Hashem had commanded them to do. So they decided, okay, that's the end of the project. We're finished the project. Now we're going to wait for Hashem's next project. The other thing it wants to say by saying Vatechel, again, passively, part of the work, even though it appeared that they were doing it, was really done miraculously by itself. It came about by itself. For example, the example he gives is Shai Menorah. Chachamim tell us about the menorah, shenasit me'atzma, that it was made by itself, because Midrash brings down that he's quoting Midrash Rabbah here, says that Talal couldn't figure out how precisely to do it so that it would all come out. Again, there had to be one piece. So what did Hashem tell him to do? He threw the metal into the pot, and magically and miraculously the menorah popped out with everything exactly as it was supposed to be. So shenasik me'atzma, it was done by itself, and that's, by the way, that's based on a psukim in Terumah where it says mikshat te'aseh, passively the menorah shall be made as a piece, one solid piece of metal. Therefore, lokine hakol alehem. Therefore, it doesn't say that the Jewish people completed all the work. It says the work was completed. Ki yesh b'malcha. Ki yesh And there were other types, parts of the work where the work was done miraculously. They just made it look like they were doing something, like they looked like they were stitching something together or they were hanging something together, and it happened miraculously by itself. Okay, Vayasu b'nei Yisrael. Vagam, again, why does it say b'nei Yisrael made it? We just said there were only a small handful of people involved. The only ones who were involved in the actual work, forget about the donations, the only ones who were involved in the actual work were Bezalel and the people who volunteered. Nonetheless, why does it give credit to all of the Jewish people for all of the work? Shlucho shel Adam Kimoto. Somebody, if you appoint an agent to do something for you, it's as if you did it yourself, with the exception of if it's a Dvar Aveira. There's a whole story about you can't appoint an agent, say to an agent, go steal something for me. Doesn't work. But anything that's a positive, when you appoint an agent to do something, that agent is as if you're doing it yourself. I mean, there's certain things you can't. You can't appoint an agent and say, put on tefillin for me. But you can appoint an agent to say, for example, write a pair of tefillin for me. Write a Sefer Torah for me. Okay, but there are certain things you can't hire an agent and say, eat a piece of matzah for me on Seder night. Won't work. Certain mitzvahs we have to ourselves, but in general, we know that certain time. Example, the classic example is Brit Milah. Not how many of us know how to do a Brit Milah? Not everyone. So what do? We go to the mall and say, I want you to be my shliach to give my son Brit Milah. And that's what we do. And many Britim where you do it, you will hear the rabbi will specifically ask the father to appoint the moel as his shliach. So it is if he is doing the mitzvah himself, because it's his mitzvah to do. Okay, so therefore, since the Bnei Yisrael, they were representing, they were agents of Bnei Yisrael, Kilu Kol Yisrael Asu. It's as if all of Bnei Yisrael did it. The Hagam Shalom Matzinu Shas Betzalel El B'Mamar Hashem. Wait a minute, Hashem was the one who appointed Betzalel. He says to Moshe, I appointed Betzalel. So it was B'Mamar Hashem Behem Lohem Shlochu. They didn't appoint him. Alpha Pikein Hareis Kimolav. By accepting Hashem's appointment of Betzalel, as we saw last week, we talked about this a little bit. Therefore, it's as if they had appointed him, and therefore it's as if all of them were involved in doing the work. Okay. Od Nira, another thing that appears to me, Kikan Asa Kasuf Machberet HaKlalot B'Kiyum HaTorah. The Torah is connecting the general principles of accepting the Torah. The Haran shows Ki B'nei Yisrael Yisku Zelazeh, that we have the ability to help. We need to help each other to be able to fulfill the Torah, because no individual can fulfill all 613 mitzvot. The Torah was given for us to fulfill each one. Collectively, we can fulfill all the mitzvah, but individually, we each do that which we are able to do, and therefore, collectively, since we share our merit of the mitzvah we do with the rest of Klal Yisrael, all of Klal Yisrael can fulfill all of the mitzvah. And this is perhaps when it says that's to hint to this fact that we love our friend. How do we love our friend? Perish l'tzachu kamodcha, that he is like us. When he is at peace and he will fulfill mitzvot, when he is complete, you can be complete. If each individual is complete and fulfills their mission, then all of Klal Yisrael together can fulfill their mission. Therefore, every fellow Jew is not really somebody else. He's really a part of you, because he is helping you fulfill your mission. Because there are certain parts of, as I said, of 613 minutes that you can't fulfill, and he's doing it for you, just like you're doing things for him. It's impossible to find one person who has to perform all 613 mitzvot. The simplest explanation is we have Kohanim have different mitzvot, Leviim have different mitzvot, Yisraelim have different mitzvot, and Nashim and women have different mitzvot. Mitzvot that only women can do, not men. There's certain mitzvot that only Kohen can do, not a Yisrael. And there are mitzvot similarly with Levium, Nashim. How can a person fulfill all 613 mitzvot? That he will through that achieve fulfillment of his spiritual body. His spiritual body is built by the mitzvot he performs. And we know that the physical body, just like the physical body has 248 bones, limbs, and 635 sinews or vessels, blood vessels running through it.
165.
And each one of those has a spiritual counterpart that builds your spiritual goof, if you want to call it. It's a very strange thing, a spiritual goof. That's a strange thing. But that's your neshama. How is your neshama is nourished through the mitzvot that you perform. And each part of your neshama has a mitzvah that has to be performed for it. Elavadai, the only way we can understand that, by joining all of Klal Yisrael together, that's how we can fulfill all of the mitzvot. And each one, by his performing a mitzvah, is not only performing it on his own behalf, he's performing it on behalf of those members of Klal Yisrael who don't have that mitzvah to perform. That's why the Torah says here, Vayasu b'nei Yisrael. B'nei Yisrael collectively did Kol Asher Tzivah Hashem, Kina lekulam yachad. It includes all of them together, Masei kulam, and all of the work is attributed to everybody. Hagam, even though Shemem Eviu Anidava, some brought donations, some did the actual work. Yomar al klolotov she'asakol. Therefore, we can say concerning the group, the whole collective, that they did all the work. The Samach Mamar Zel Melechet HaBegadim. This verse comes immediately after making all the begadim for the Kohanim. Asher Asa'um Yechidim Yisrael. You didn't have 10 people pulling the needle, or all of Klal Yisrael pulling the needle when they sewed the garments for the Kohanim. To teach us, again, same thing, that nobody can do it individually, we're doing it collectively. And because collectively we all did it, it's as if we individually all did it, because everybody was working on behalf of the collective good. Okay. They did exactly as Hashem commanded. What is this supposed to be teaching us? This is to remove that suspicion. Yomar ki asiba hayta siba mitzad ha'maseh shehaya bo davar b'lti hagon. A person who was living at the time, who saw what happened. Now, what happened? They finished building the Mishkan. Now, the Midrash says, by the way, and this is not based on Torah, but the Midrash says that they finished building it on the 25th day of Kislev, day that we now know as the first day of Hanukkah. But they did not assemble it and put it into use. No, it's not put into service until 3 months later, the beginning of Nisan. And a person who was sitting there during those 3 months saying, hey, what's going on here? We did all this work. We put it all together. Why aren't we using it? It's like, you bought somebody a brand new present, a nice gift. You know they need it. You know they want to use it, and they put it in their machzan, and they thought they don't even use it. What would you say? You would say, I guess I didn't give the right gift. I didn't do it right. Something must be wrong. So the pasuk here, when it says that Bnei Yisrael did exactly what they were supposed to do, is so that people shouldn't have thought that, hey, why aren't we using this for 3 months? Because they might have suspected that somehow something didn't fit together. That's why we can't use it. Now we're going to have to start all over again. They might have been thinking that. Or they forgot something, and that's why we're not putting it into service yet. Why aren't we immediately using it? Was the question. Therefore, the pasuk says, no, it's all complete. They did everything they were supposed to do. Well, if that's the case, wait a minute. Why aren't we using it? Why isn't it being put in service immediately the next day, the day we finish it? What's the reason Hashem waits till the first month? Because this is the most praiseworthy month. It's called the first month. because it's the month we leave Mitzrayim, and therefore it's the month that Am Yisrael begins. He tells Moshe specifically, I want you to wait until Rosh Chodesh Nisan to put it together. Not because we need that time to fix all that and get all the button cracks and kinks and whatever fixed out. No, everything is okay. But there's a specific reason. Amar, what is this unique? What's the significance of the month of Nisan? That is the month when Avram was informed about Yitzchak's birth, that there would be a nation of Israel. And that's the same reason why Nisan is the month we leave Egypt. Same way, ultimately, Nisan is the month we're going to be redeemed, because Nisan is a special month. It's the month of rebirth. Look at nature. Nature begins its renewal in the month of Nisan. And therefore, Hashem wants to wait till the month of Nisan. Not because there was anything wrong. And that's why the Torah specifically says, don't think there was anything wrong. Everything was built perfectly to specification. It's okay. We're just not going to start because we want to wait for the most appropriate day to start work in the Mishkan. Okay, Asher Tzivah Hashem Kein Asu. Again, it repeats it again. Asher Tzivah Hashem Kein Asu. As Hashem commanded, they did. Tam Amru Asu, that they did. Well, you speak from Amru Vayasu. Wait, we just said Vayasu B'nai Yisrael, they did it. Ulai ki elo aleim hakatuv shekimu kol ma shetzivah Hashem et Moshe b'Torah. They fulfilled everything. It's to tell us that not only this, but they filled everything. That Hashem wants to give great praise, show how important, how special they are, how valuable they are, how much it's worth. The fact that they built this Mishkan so perfectly according to the instructions that it was built, Hashem counted as if they had fulfilled the entire Torah. And through this work that they are involved in the exacting specifications of the Mishkan, that is able to dispel the Chet HaEgel and able to achieve for Bnei Yisrael the atonement for Chet HaEgel. And that's why it says, Kein Asu, that they did it exactly as they were commanded, to show that they had charata and they were able to get past the Chet HaEgel. Okay, all that was the Arachaim HaKadosh. Now we go to Malbim. Malbim wants to understand what's the difference between avodah and malacha, which I sort of alluded to beginning, but let's read it inside the Malbim. Kol ma she'asu umanim, whatever the artisans, the craftspeople did, is nikra malacha. It's called malacha because malacha is creative. I would call it craftsmanship or artisanship. That's why it's Mamnasa Umanim. It's called malacha. By the way, that's what we're prohibited from doing on Shabbat, not avodah. You want to work on Shabbat, you want to go in your house and move your books or your table or whatever. As long as you're in the Reshut HaYachid, you can do it theoretically. It's not the best way to spend your Shabbos, but okay. But malacha, the things that we're prohibited from doing on Shabbos, all relate to craftsmanship, to taking material and changing it into something different. Whether it's taking two pieces of wood and nailing them together, whether it's taking a piece of metal, melting it down and reshaping it. All of those are taking material and reformulating it into something else. That's malacha. Ulam, hamase bi'atzma. So when I will look at the people doing it, it's malacha, it's craftsmanship. Ulam hamase bi'atzma shekimu ba'kol Yisrael. For them, they were fulfilling mitzvot Hashem. They were doing this work. Yes, they were craftsmen, fine. But they were doing it to fulfill Hashem's commandment. So hence, for them, it was avodah Hashem. It was doing avodah. It was serving Hashem. The net zenit yaches el ha'am kulo. And again, it's all of Bnei Yisrael get credit for it. Shasu avodah zu shel nidvat hamishkan ve'aseu va'osek bo l'shem Hashem. One who did this with the right motivation, doing it not because I want people to say I'm a great artisan or I'm a great craftsmanship or I'm a great donator because I gave a big donation. The reason we're doing it is because Hashem commanded us. We're doing this to build this for Hashem. We have the right intention, the right mind frame as we're doing this. That's called avodat Mishkan. And it says that Klal Yisrael collectively was able to do these things with the proper motivation. And that's why the pasuk says, they fulfilled the commandments of Hashem bechol paratav, even in all of the details. And not only in all the details, but even having the proper frame of mind as they were going through all the minutiae, all the nitty-gritty of building everything, of collecting everything, of even the people who were giving donations, all because they were doing it appropriately. And that's what this is, why we have this whole pasuk of Kol Asher Tziva Hashem et Moshe. The Netziv, Hamek Davar, says the following. It says Avodat Mishkan Ohel Moed. We talk about what is the Mishkan, what is the Ohel. Kan, this use of the word Mishkan, Ein Mashmot Mishkan HaPrati Shi HaYiriot Shel Sheish. This is not referring to the Mishkan, which is the lower covering over the boards, over the krashim, which is made of all of the fabrics, the red wool, the blue wool, the bread, the tchelet, the argaman, and the shani. Okay, that's not what this word here, when it says Avodat Mishkan Ohel Moed, is referring not to the limited Mishkan, Ela Bichlal Nikra Mishkan. The whole structure, the whole edifice is called Mishkan. Milashon Minatati Mishkani B'tochechem. As Hashem says, I will place my shekhinah, my presence in your midst. Behind Shemafarish Mishkan Ohel Moed, and that's why it explains that the Mishkan we're talking about is Mishkan Ohel Moed. The Mishkan, not just the cover, but the whole thing. Shebo, why is it called Ohel Moed, the tent of meeting? Shebo Nitvadu HaKadosh Baruch Hu Moshe Yisrael, because that is where Hashem and the Jewish people and their representative Moshe meet. That's where they get together. And that answers Tosfot's question in terms of what is the Mishkan referring to. Here again, this Mishkan is the general Mishkan, not the specific Mishkan. Kol Asher Tiva. Why Kechol Asher Tiva? Why not Kasher Tiva? Ella, Haperish Afilu Devarim Shelo Amar La Moshe. Even those things that Moshe didn't explicitly say. Mikol Makom Nase Yafa, they were done appropriately. Why? Al Pi B'Tzalel Shofi Alav Ruach Mimarom L'Chavein and Haratzah. Moshe gave B'Tzalel the general principles, and B'Tzalel was able to, through the Ruach of Kodesh, that Kodesh Baruch Hu gave him, he was able to fulfill it every detail exactly as Hashem wanted. Even though Moshe didn't hand over to him the blueprints with all the details, he gave him the general principles. He was able to figure out on his own, with Hashem, with the help that Hashem gave him, he was able to figure out exactly how to build it. As the Gemara in Yerushalmi Peah says, Betzalel did all that Hashem commanded Moshe. Not all that Moshe commanded him to do, but even those things everything that Hashem told Moshe, even those things that Moshe may not have given to him directly, he still did it. Oto Moshe ein kativ kan. It doesn't say Betzalel did all that Moshe commanded him. It says all that Hashem commanded Moshe. Afil devarim shelo shamam pi rabo hiskim dato k'moshe nemar l'Moshe b'Sinai. Even those things that Moshe didn't explicitly tell Betzalel, he was able to figure out. And that's why it says Kol Asher Tiva, like all, not just Kasher Tiva, like. Shir Tiva Hashem and Moshe Kein Asu, B'davar Basher Yadua Sh'Yisrael Nit Avuma Od Sheyesh Ina Shuri B'Tocham K'mashkot Taj Ketisa. Why did they do it with such great emphasis, such great devotion, such great dedication? Because they knew, Bnei Yisrael really knew that Hashem was going to rest His presence through their work. They wanted to make sure that it was perfect. We would have thought that they did it out of they would have overextended themselves to make it even more beautiful. But the answer, they did exactly what Hashem commanded, no more and no less. Okay, Rashi, as I said, goes through all of the definitions of what each of the things are. I think that we're going to skip that because we're running a little bit later than I thought. So we're going to skip through Rashi. But again, Rashi just goes through each of the things on that list that we went through and compared and tells us what they are. And then here we go. Then he says, okay, now, the chapter in our start where it talks about these different pieces is Vayaviu et HaMishkan. They bring it to all the pieces. They don't assemble it. Now, I would have thought you went through all this work. You you had this team that was building this whole structure, but they didn't build it as a structure. They built it as a lot of pieces. It's a prefab stuff. So they built all of this prefab material. They got it all ready to assemble. But instead of assembling it, it says that they bring all of the pieces to Moshe. Why didn't they assemble it? It was too heavy. Let's find out what Rashi has to say about why they didn't assemble it. Okay? They were not able to assemble it, to put it together. Why? Why weren't they able to assemble it? They were strong enough to put the pieces together and build it all. We're going to see. Let's see what Rashi says. Then we'll get to it. Okay. Lefi, what's the reason why? Moshe has no part in the construction of the Mishkan. He doesn't make a donation. I mean, he probably gave a machzeh shekel like every other Jew, but he isn't one of the machers in the work. He's back. Tzalo, you're in charge. I'm finished. That's it. I delegate. You're finished. Here's the job. Do it. But again, since he wasn't involved, he niach la HaKadosh Baruch Hu hakamato. Hashem left it so that only Moshe would be able to assemble. Shelo hayayachol hakimo shum ish. No other person could assemble it. Why? Machmat kovet hakroshim. These are heavy pieces of wood. 10 amot high, 5 meters high wood, solid, thick wood pole. That's pretty heavy. I mean, we figured out. I went through they figured out it's something to the order of, 1,000 metric ton kilos. Not something one person can very easily pick up and maneuver. But wait a minute. But they had a whole team of artisans. They could have asked, they could have assembled a whole team to build it up. She'ein koach b'adam l'zakfan. There's no person, I guess there was nobody available who could pick up these blocks. But how did they make them? Well, they made them. They picked them up to get them to the factory to make them. They had to somebody chopped them down. Somebody brought them. They didn't just take the trees as they were growing. They had to chop them down. They had to shape them. Somebody did it, right? But anyway, HaKadosh Baruch Hu made it so that it would not assemble for anybody except for Moshe. Well, Moshe Mido, and that's why Moshe was the one who assembles. Amar Moshe l'fnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but Moshe himself asks Hashem, if they couldn't do it, how am I going to do it? They had a whole team to do it. They couldn't do it. How am I, one single person, going to be able to do it? Amar lo, what does Hashem answer him? So katav yadcha nira kimakima. You do your part. You make believe you're assembling it. It'll do the rest. You just get started. You make believe you're picking the piece of wood up. Boom, it'll be picked up. And that's why later on we read, Hukam HaMishkan. The Mishkan was assembled, was put together. Hukam Me'elav. It was assembled by itself, and he quotes that from the Midrash of Rabbi Tanchuma, that Moshe isn't the assembler. Kadosh Baruch Hu is really the assembler, but he gives the kavod to Moshe, since he wasn't involved in any other aspect of the Mishkan, that only when he makes it look like he's assembling it, does it assemble. By Yevarach Otam Moshe gives them all a bracha. At the end, we read after they brought everything to Moshe, he gives them a bracha. What was the bracha? Amar lahem, he said to them, Yehi ratzon, may it be the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, shetishra shechina v'masi yadecha, that your handiwork should help us bring the Shekhinah, and it should rest on your handiwork. And then what did he say? He then brought the tefillah that he offered was V'hinoam Hashem Elokeinu Aleinu Masi Yodeinu Kodin Aleinu Masi Yodeinu. This pasuk of V'hinoam, which we know from Tilim, this is one of the 11 prakim of Tilim that are written by Moshe, basically from chapter Tzadi to chapter Kuf, according to tradition, are written by Moshe. That's the Medrash this Rashi is based on. But the interesting thing is, it is based on this Midrash, by the way, V'hinoam, that this is the tefillah Moshe gives the builders of the Mishkan, that we don't say. This is why we don't say V'hinoam when there's a chag in the middle of the week, because V'hinoam says that we say that as a result of doing all that malacha, and we don't do malacha, when we have one day during the week that we don't do malacha, then we don't say V'hinoam. We don't say this tefillah Moshe. We leave it for the next Shabbos. Okay. Ramban. Okay. Ramban wants to understand why it says Vayaviu et HaMishkan el Moshe. They bring the Mishkan to Moshe. Et ha'ol v'et kol kelav. Is the Mishkan one thing and the Ohel is another thing, or the Mishkan and all the same thing? Ramban wants to say that the Mishkan and the Ohel are two different things. The Mishkan is the first layer. The Ohel is the second layer and third layer. So he says, shiur kamo b'vav. This pasuk is written as though it was written with a vav. What? It's the vav. Vayiviyat hamishkan el Moshe. They brought the Mishkan, the lowest covering, the et ha'oel, and the other coverings, that kol kelav. Why? Ki yiriot sheish mashzar hein sheshmo sheshman Mishkan. When it says the Mishkan, that's referring to the lowest layer, the lowest roof, the roof which is made of the thread of the different colored wool. That the yiriot, the Mishkan, is made of 10 yiriot, 10 long woven sheets of different colored threads. That's called the Mishkan. And concerning those 10 sheets, that are 5 of them are stitched in one side, 5 are stitched on the other side, and the 2 groups of 5 are stitched together with the 10, with the 50 hooks. Those 10 are called the Mishkan. The Yirioti Izim, and the next layer, the goat skins that are over that as a rainproofer, Heina Oel. Those are referred to as the Oel. Kashayomar Bahen, Yasit Yiriot Izim Li Oel, Ala Mishkan. And the pasuk itself calls it Oel. The Yiriot Izim, the goat skins, are to cover, to be the tent over the Mishkan. The Chibartu et Ha'oel, the Yirhayachai. V'chein, and similarly at Mishkan et Halo et Yiseyu, later on the same thing. Afkan. So too, Vayivir Mishkan et Moshe vi et Ha'oel. So it's as even though the pasuk doesn't have the vav, it's as if it's written with a vav. But then Ramban says, wait a minute, just because in this pasuk I'm telling you that Mishkan means only the lower level and the Oel means the second level, that's not the only usage that each of those words have. Lifamim, you should understand, sometimes Yikra Kol HaBayit Ohel Moed, the entire structure is called Ohel Moed. Kasher Amar, as it says, Vasu Kol Asher Tziviticha Ohel Moed. They make everything the Ohel Moed. Ki Ohel Moed Hu HaBayit Bichlalo Asher Yivayit Shama. Ohel Moed is the entire structure where Hashem will come to meet us. V'chein Kol Klei Avodah HaMishkan Li Ohel Moed. So Ohel Moed doesn't have the same meaning as Ohel. Ohel means the covering. Ohel Moed means the entire structure. The skeleton that's wrapped around is the krashim. That's when it says Ohel only in this parshat, it means only the goatskins, because the krashim are listed separately. When it says the Ohel Moed later on, which was as Ohel Moed, there it's talking about the whole thing, the krashim, the adanim, and all of the attachers, whether it's the poles, whether it's the rings, all of that is all considered part of the Ohel when it says Ohel Moed. Okay. Yes. Yes. Once it's put together the first time, they understood how to put it together. What's that? You make believe you're working, and Hashem does the rest. They figured that out. They broke the code. Okay, Moshe gave them the secret. Once Moshe understood that, then anybody can put it together. And obviously, if we see, each Levium have their job and how they do it, and they make it look like they're really doing it. But in reality, the Mishkan is moving itself. In reality, I mean, we have to go through the paces of doing it. Okay. We don't have time for this. Oh, that's the last thing I have. Okay. All right. So that's it. I guess, okay, which is good because okay. Basically, as I said, the basic lesson we see from all of this is, first and foremost, the unity of the Jewish people is necessary. It's not optional. If we are not all united, we cannot achieve the building of the Mishkan, which is there to bring Hashem's presence into Am Yisrael, into the world. So it's critical that we accept and understand that even though we each have different roles to play, whether we're a Kohen, whether we're a Levi, whether we're Yisrael, whether we're Ashkenazi, whether we're whatever, we're all in this together. We all have a part to play, and we can't. And it's not our job to look at somebody else and say, "Hey, you're not carrying your weight." Our job is to carry our weight and make sure that we are carrying it on behalf of Am Yisrael. And we really need to do it in a way that causes others to want to carry their weight, rather than trying to coerce them to carry their weight. I think that's one of the key lessons here that we have throughout this parsha. It's constantly reminding us that we are united, that we have to be united, and that we have to be united and dedicated to serving Hashem. And when we forget that, when we're united and we forget Hashem, we also go off in the wrong direction. So we have to be united. We have to be dedicated in the service of Hashem if we, the Jewish people, are to succeed in our mission, which, as I said, in this case, it's building the Mishkan and making it sure it's functioning. But today, in history, our mission is to be an Or LaGoyim, to teach the world about how to live an ethical life, a moral life. And we hope and pray that we will understand that we have a unique role individually and collectively, and that we hope we are able to fulfill that role so that we can be Zocheh Gula Shlema Meher V'Yameinu. Thank you all. I just want to open up for questions, comments, feedback. Anybody have any questions or comments? Before I wish you all a good rest of the week, a Shabbat Shalom, and Be'ezrat Hashem. We'll see you next week. I think next week's plan at this point, my plan is next week we'll speak a little bit about Megillat Esther instead of the regular Shabbos portion, since Purim is right around the corner. So I wish you all a good evening and Laila Tov, and a good rest of the week and a Shabbat Shalom.